Alright, final video for the X90J, and real quick just showing how well it's packed. I really like that cardboard on the front, makes it pulling it out without getting your hands all over the glass or feeling like you're gonna break anything. The legs are very nice, they're numbered 1 and 2 so you can't mix them up. And at the bottom of the TV it says 1 and 2 on each side so you know which one goes where. The bottom of the box where the styrofoam is, you can also slide that out the sides so that you can fit the feet on while it's still holding the TV up, which is nice as well. Alright, moving on. Fortnite on the Xbox Series X in SDR, and right here I'm showing the peak luminance off, low, medium, high, and I gotta tell you, SDR gets really freaking bright on this TV. I measured 785 nits in SDR, not HDR, 785 SDR, 10% window, and around 540 full screen in SDR. So SDR brightness is extremely bright and will not be an issue for all but the brightest of rooms. So now after going through and making proper setting adjustments and so on, that dropped a little bit to 700 nits with the max backlight setting and peak luminance at high, but that's still that's really bright. Turning the peak luminance off and having the backlight at the default of 35 was 344, and then if you push the backlight up to max 50, that's 427, and I found 45 to be at 400 nits. Personally, I think 400 nits is good for SDR gaming. That's what I set it to, and in my previous settings video I go through all of that. Just to throw a few more measurement numbers out real quick. In HDR, 1%, which is most representative of your highlights, was 623, and then we go up a little bit to 630 at 2%, 773 nits at 5%, 778 at 10%, and then we start going down to 688 at 25, 556 at 50, 570 at 75, and again 570 at 100. So the 10% window really doesn't matter very much. It's not representative of real content. The 1% is, like I said, about the closest thing to your highlights, so that probably should be the most important number, at least I think, until we start being able to measure even smaller windows than that, which I'm trying to work on something for that. And then also the 50, 75, 100, that's your more representative of it being a an outdoors very bright scene. So getting 550 to 570 in those ranges, that's pretty decent compared to like especially OLED. OLEDs don't get bright in big windows like that. So anyway, I think that's pretty much all the numbers I need to cover. The out-of-the-box grayscale, color temperature, color accuracy, all of that stuff was actually really good. The only two issues is the out-of-the-box contrast setting is a little too high. It doesn't clip white, but colors were being clipped a little bit using the Spears and Munzel disc. And then right here, real quick in the video, you're seeing a little bit of glare from my window that was the curtain wasn't fully covering, so I fixed that. But I figured I would leave that in the video just so you can see what it's like to have a little bit of glare on the TV. So anyway, the contrast setting at 90 was just a little too high. I had to bump that down to 83. And then the TV out of the box has a lifted near black range, just from 5 to 10, where it's almost double as bright as it should be. So that would make your shadows look a little gray, a little too gray, a little overblown. Easily fixed. If you get the Kalman for Bravia app on the TV, then you can unlock the 20-point white balance controls and do it a little bit better. But if you don't want to go through all that, you can just use the out-of-the-box 10-point controls and only adjust the first point. Again, I have a settings video, shows how to do that. Not a big deal. And really, if you just even left it as it was for gaming, you might not even care, because then it just gives you a little more visibility in shadows. And I really think gamers are going to be the main ones looking at this TV. The 4K at 120 Hz does work without dropping the resolution in half like last year on the X90J. The 2021 Sony models, though, they all have the same MediaTek chipset for the HDMI 2.1, and in Vincent Tio's review of the A90J, he pointed out that in HDR at 4K 120 Hz, there's some posterization or banding in game. I try to show it here on Dirt 5 and in Destiny 2 and in Forza Horizon 4. I switch back and forth. All these are HDR. And so I switch from 60 to 120 Hz back and forth, and I'm not seeing much difference in the skies, and that's generally the most obvious area where you would see it. So I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just saying it may be very difficult to actually see in real content. You tell me. I'll be coming up to it here in the video, and when I'm looking at the sky, and I'll show you when I switch back and forth from 60 Hertz and 120 Hertz. Again, I didn't really see any change. So I zoomed in here on the sky, and I'm toying around with changing the smooth gradation setting, from low, medium, high, off. Again, to me, I'm not seeing very much happen up there. Maybe I'm in a bad spot or not looking at the right thing. I don't know. Like I said, I tried 3 different games, and I know typically it's in the skies that you see it. So here I'm switching the Xbox back to 60 Hertz, and then switch back to the game. And again, I don't really see a difference. So I don't think it's really should be much of a concern for most people. Alright, so now moving on to other topics. Having an OLED now, having the A80J, and looking at the X90J, which is not OLED, I do have to say that if you have an OLED, you're probably going to have some issues with the black levels. But trying to clear that out of my mind and go off of the X900H that I had previously, I would say the black levels are roughly the same. The issue that I have with the TV is the 24 dimming zones. It's just not enough, especially at the price point. I know the price has already come down a couple $100, but I think it needs to come down a lot further for only 24 dimming zones, and having the local dimming set to high is pretty much, in my opinion, something you have to do with the TV. Otherwise, the blooming is obvious in a lot of scenarios. High makes it pretty good. I mean, I will say, like, you can make it look pretty good, but I know with the X900H, the local dimming on high was not technically the most correct setting. I personally used it on high anyway because I noticed a lot of blooming in subtitles on it. So anyway, on the X90J, I think most of the picture settings default to local dimming on medium, and to me there just is quite a bit of noticeable blooming at medium, and I think high really helps it. So I strongly suggest putting local dimming setting to high on the X90J, and that's enough rambling about blooming. Alright, now here we are in Forza Horizon 4. I think everything looks pretty darn good. Again, I think this is a gamer's TV primarily. I think the dark room performance, for serious home theater movie watching probably is not its forte. But I think a lot of gamers will be interested in this TV because there still is not very many options for non-OLED 4K 120 Hz TVs that also support Dolby Vision. This does not do 4K 120 Dolby Vision at the same time. You do, like on the other Sony TVs, have to pick the HDMI setting to either be enhanced for the 4K 120 Hz support or enhanced for Dolby Vision, which is then only 4K 60 Hz. Now, I don't think that's the biggest deal breaker in the world, because at least it does support Dolby Vision. And what I personally like to do is I run my receiver with all of my other devices, my Shield and my 4K Blu-ray player and all that kind of stuff, through the HDMI 3, which is the eARC port. I have that set to Dolby Vision. And then I run the Xbox through HDMI 4, which is set to enhanced for 4K 120Hz. And that covers my Dolby Vision video, movie, TV watching part of things without having to switch the port every time I want to do something. Now, the question is, when the Dolby Vision gaming support really comes out on the Xbox, how much of a hassle is that going to be? How many games are going to support it? How often are you going to have to switch and go into the setting and change it from Dolby Vision to 120 Hz and then from 120 Hz back to Dolby Vision? So that could be an annoyance, but if you look at Samsung, you don't have that issue at all because they don't even support Dolby Vision. So the main competitor at this point that I can think of is going to be the Hisense U8G. I do plan on trying to pick that up as soon as it's available, so look out for that. But anyway, there's not really a whole lot of options in this small space of a gamer that wants to play at 4K and 120 Hertz, and they don't want to have that risk of burn-in with an OLED. So another option would be the LG Nano 90 or whatever, but that's pretty much a carryover from last year. It's still IPS, so the contrast is very low, and it's not going to have good blacks, and most people just shouldn't consider that. So the X90J is a pretty solid option, and coming back to it for its picture quality, it does have the XR cognitive processor that the other Sony TVs like the X95J that's coming out soon will have, and the OLEDs, the A80J and A90J, have that, and it does a really good job at having very good sharpness and clarity and detail. To be honest, the A80J does still stand above it, but that's kind of obvious with it being OLED. But I gotta be honest, side by side, there are some scenes where it can be hard to distinguish one from the other. When OLED shines, it shines. When there's a scene or a picture, whatever, with a lot of black and a lot of contrast, that's really when you get the benefit. But in, nice, bright, outdoorsy type scenes, the difference between them is not a whole lot. It's hard to really pick out too many differences. There's some subtle, increase in depth and contrast to the colors on the A80J, but if they weren't side by side, you wouldn't know. So it really just comes down to dark areas, the true blacks and all that. That's where OLED obviously has a big advantage. So again, for gamers, I don't think that's going to be too big of an issue for most of them. And an issue that the TV does have is the uncertain future of VRR. And it's kind of a beating a dead horse at this point, but the X900H VRR update kept getting pushed and pushed and pushed, and it still doesn't have it. It was supposed to have it spring of this year was the last update that I heard on the matter. It still doesn't have it. And I did hear somewhere that Sony apparently said or told somebody, word of mouth, so who knows, that the VRR standards were going to be changing, so they wanted to wait for that to happen so that they can just do it right the first time. Whatever. It's still taking a really long time. They're saying December now of this year for VRR. We will see if that happens. Now, a lot of people don't really care about it and don't see the need for it, and I'm kind of in the middle. I know on console, even the Series X, the 120 FPS modes and a lot of games don't hold 120. They drop down to 100 or 90 or whatever, and that's where VRR would really be helpful. It smooths that out, gets rid of the tearing, and would make it a better experience. But a little, not really workaround, but different way of enjoying 120 hertz on the TV now. What I do is, Destiny 2 is 60 FPS in PvE, but with the Xbox Series X at least, you can force it to 120 hertz so that you get the lower input lag while playing the game at 60 FPS and having, all the graphical detail and not having to sacrifice anything. You just don't get the actual 120 FPS visual smoothness, but you do get the feel of 120 hertz because it lowers the input lag. So that's just a little trick that you can use in the meantime. And, maintaining 60 FPS or even, some of the games that are 30 FPS, way easier on the system. So there's way less frame rate drops. And so the screen tearing, pretty much not an issue. No stuttering, that kind of thing. So until the VRR update comes out, if you are on the Xbox, I do recommend setting the Xbox to 120 hertz, but then in the games, not using the 120 FPS modes. On the PlayStation, you can't do that. Now there's been rumors of the Sony TVs having this, secret VRR experience with PlayStation 5. But that really is just people saying, oh, it feels like it. There's no proof of that. There's nothing showing that to be true. And, the PlayStation 5 still has an AMD, GPU and processor and would be using FreeSync, so don't put any stock into that. The one thing that the PS5 will do with the X90J and the other Sony TVs, though, is a sort of ALLM or auto low latency mode. So if the TV has the automatic picture preset, whatever option turned on, and you connect a PS5 or PS4, PS4 Pro, it will detect what it is and put it into game mode. But anyway, showed a few short clips there of just some random TV content. Now moving into motion test to end the video with. So just kind of jumping around on the settings here. I personally like to use the black frame insertion or clearness setting to 1, and the smoothness setting I keep at minimum. And then the Cinemotion setting has to do with the frame rate and the film cadence. So if you are watching TV, broadcast TV, network TV content, you would use low. But if you're using Netflix or whatever high quality stuff, movie content, use high. And if you are seeing any frame skips that are obvious, that's probably because the Cinemotion setting is not correct. But the motion flow, all this stuff, it's all personal preference, up to you. I just figured I would end this video just showing the motion performance using a variety of different settings here. But overall, I gotta say the motion is excellent. And if you have been following any of my videos, I'm sure you've heard that I do not like soap opera effect. I never use any motion smoothing settings at all. And with the Sony A80J and now here with the X90J, I have been setting it to smoothness minimum and clearness at 1 just to try something different and see if it bothers me, and so far it has not. So I guess I get a little bit of increased motion resolution with no noticeable soap opera effect, and so far it's been pretty nice. And if I do notice it, I will talk about it in a future video of the A80J. But again, motion settings, everyone likes a different thing. But maybe from time to time, just try out something different, and you might like it more, it might grow on you, or you might not. So in this test, I like this just because it's a panning camera, it's walking through a room, It's a dark room with some bright lights, and so there's just a lot of different things you can look at and keep your eye focused on to see how the motion is. I like to look at the little lights hanging on the walls, and with some settings it kind of looks like they split and kind of jump, whereas other settings it smooths them together and then they don't look like it's moving really. Kind of hard to describe, but I'm sure you can see it in the video. So anyway, not going to try and ramble anymore. I'm going to let this play out through the rest of these settings here, and that's the end of the video. So overall, X90J is a great TV. I think it's a little overpriced right now. The blooming is much better if you put local dimming at high, in my opinion. I think it's a pretty good TV for gamers. If you are someone who is coming from an OLED, I don't think you're going to be happy replacing your OLED with it, but it could be a good second TV in your house. If you've never had OLED and you're concerned about burn-in and nothing anyone tells you will change your mind, then this is one of the few TVs this year to be looking at, although hopefully the X95J is a good step up, and I will do my best to pick one of those up when they come out. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.